Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Vietnam Virtual Voyage. I am Zach Cino, and I am a senior at Kent Stark, majoring in information technology.
Hi, I'm Cindy Hutmacher. I'm majoring in international relations, and I think I'm a junior.
I'm Grant Nadler, senior accounting major, and today we're going to be taking you on a virtual voyage through Vietnam, highlighting points of the country's history, culture, landscape. We're also going to be taking you to a lot of the different spots we would have visited while we would have been studying abroad.
To start, we want to give you a few pre-voyage facts. The population is 97 million, and the largest city is Ho Chi Minh City, which is on the very south side of the country. It has almost 3.5 million people. The capital is actually on the opposite side in the north, Hanoi, which is also very populous. The language is Vietnamese, which was the name Vietnam, would make sense. And the currency is the Vietnamese dong. One U.S. dollar is about 23,442 dong. So U.S. money goes a long way if you are visiting Vietnam. And the size of Vietnam is 127,888 square miles. That's just a few facts to start thinking about Vietnam. And on the bottom right of the screen is their national flag.
To better prepare you for the virtual voyage we will be undertaking, we decided that a brief history of Vietnam was important. So the first dynasty of Vietnam was the Hung Bang dynasty, which was ruled by Hung kings. In 111 BC, the Han dynasty from China pulled Vietnam into their empire. Vietnam would remain under the Chinese rule for the next 1,000 years. In 938 AD, Ngo Quyen defeated the Chinese and gained independence for Vietnam. Vietnam was then ruled by a succession of dynasties, including the Lai, Tran, and Le dynasty. Under the Le dynasty, Vietnam expanded south and was able to conquer part of the Khmer Empire. In 1858, the French came to Vietnam and eventually incorporated Vietnam into part of French Indochina. France ruled up until 1954 when they were defeated by communist forces led by Ho Chi Minh. This photo to the right is of President Ho Chi Minh. Continuation of the history of Vietnam. The country was then divided into communist North Vietnam and anti-communist South Vietnam. The Vietnam War began in 1959, and in 1965, the first wave of U.S. troops arrived in country to fight. The North eventually won, uniting the country under communist rule in 1975. And in 1979, Vietnam launches an invasion into Cambodia. 1992 brings about a new constitution for the country, and in 1995, full diplomatic relations are established between the U.S. and Vietnam, which previous to that, at the start of the end of the war, from that point until 1995, the U.S. had placed harsh sanctions and embargoes on Vietnam. In 2007, the United States agrees to help study the effects of the herbicide Agent Orange used in the war.
On the top right, from the pre-voyage facts, is the Vietnamese dong, and you can see that the guy on the money is Ho Chi Minh that Grant mentioned previously. He's definitely a well-known figure in Vietnam and is looked as one of the founders of where they are currently.
Our first stop on this virtual voyage is the city of Hanoi. Hanoi is the capital of Vietnam with a population of 8.1 million people. That 8.1 million people really constitutes a lot of the surrounding area outside the major city jurisdiction of Hanoi, which is why it's such a large number. Hanoi is the most visited city in Vietnam and is often nicknamed Paris of the East, thanks to the strong French influence in the city. The city originated as a small settlement along the Red River and as the capital for Imperial Vietnam. The city is known for its intermixing of French and traditional Vietnamese architectural styles. During the Vietnam War, Hanoi's railways and bridges were bombed as a way to cripple the city's transportation. In modern times, Hanoi has seen rapid investment in construction booms that have brought on high-rise buildings and a change in the metropolitan area skyline. Our next stop on the voyage is Hanoi, Vietnam National University. Vietnam National University, located in Hanoi, was created by the merging of University of Hanoi, Hanoi National University of Education, and the College of Foreign Languages in 1993. The university offers up to 167 undergraduate programs, 185 master programs, and 114 doctoral programs, including studies of natural sciences, technologies, economics, social sciences, humanities, education, and foreign studies. There are currently 36,015 undergrad students, 8,250 graduate students, and 1,163 international students. Our next stop is the Old Quarter. The Old Quarter is the name commonly given to the historical urban center of Hanoi, located outside the imperial citadel of Thang. This area was home to residents, manufacturing, and different types of commerce. Each street was specific to one type of manufacturing or commerce, and another name for the area was the 36 streets. The Old Quarter dates back to the Lai and Tran dynasties. The area is still the commercial center of Vietnam. Only the Quan Truong Gate remains standing of what were 7 original gates in the Old Quarter. This is the Quang Trung Gate, and as I said just a moment ago, it's the only surviving, still standing gate of what was once the Old Quarter. Now we come to Thang Long Water Puppet Theater. The tradition of water puppet theater dates back to the 11th century. The origin of this style of theater comes from villagers standing in flooded rice paddy fields and entertaining other villagers with their puppets just above the water level. The puppet masters provide the illusion that the puppets are gliding across the surface of the water. TripAdvisor recommends that any tourists show up at least half an hour early to the theater due to the immense popularity of the show. So the bottom left picture shows what the modern day theater and stage looks like for the water puppetry. And the image to the right is a just picture of what a flooded rice paddy field would look like, where in the olden times villagers would stand there up to waist deep water and work the puppetry.
On this slide, we have a little mini video to give you a taste of what you would see and hear at the puppet show. So as you can see, that's definitely something different than what we experience here in America. So it's definitely a very popular destination for people who are visiting Hanoi. It's definitely a must-see.
One of Vietnam's most famous historical structures is that of the Temple of the Literature. Traditionally called Van Mieu, the Temple of Literature is a temple dedicated to Confucius. The temple was built in 1070 at the time of Emperor Lai Thang Tong. The temple is featured on the back of the 100,000 Vietnamese dong. The temple also serves as home to the Imperial Academy, which was Vietnam's first public university. There are a total of 5 courtyards at the temple, consisting of gardens, a large pond known as the Well of Heavenly Clarity, many statues of Confucius, and a house of ceremonies where people to this day still come to pray and pay other respects. And there are also, within the temple, there exists a large drum and bell tower. The temple offers a beautiful and well-preserved look at traditional Vietnamese architecture. Another fantastic mausoleum or monument in Hanoi is the Ho Chi Minh Mausoleum. The mausoleum serves as the final resting place of President Ho Chi Minh, located in Hanoi. Work on the mausoleum began on September 2nd, 1973. And it was formally opened and enshrined on August 29th, 1975. The preserved body of President Ho Chi Minh is kept in the central hall of the mausoleum, which is watched over by a military honor guard. The mausoleum has the words President Ho Chi Minh and Long Live the Socialist Republic of Vietnam chiseled and enshrined on the outside of the mausoleum. As you can look at the pictures at the bottom of the mausoleum, it's a very large, very imposing structure. And the bottom right picture shows that honor guard that is constantly at the mausoleum protecting the body of President Ho Chi Minh.
An interesting point about the Ho Chi Minh Mausoleum is that Ho Chi Minh's final wishes were actually to be cremated and spread throughout Vietnam. He actually said that he didn't want a large building like this. So it's kind of an interesting thing about his wishes and what Vietnam has actually done with him as a person. Kind of going back to what I said is that he is a very highly viewed figure. So that what we've talked about so far was Hanoi, and now we will be traveling down to Ho Chi Minh City. But to get there, we will have to take the what's known as the Reunification Express. It was originally created in 1936 by the French, but during the Vietnam War, it was greatly damaged. It was not usable anymore. So once the Vietnam War ended, the Northern Vietnamese government started a very mass scale mission to fix this railway. And they, in less than 2 years, which is a very quick time, they were able to repair 1,334 bridges, 27 tunnels, and 158 stations. And these were all through the north and south from war damages. Upon completion of this, there was a train that went from the whole way of the rail, and that was really a symbol of the reunification of Vietnam, that a train was able to go from north to south or south to north. There's a very popular place in Hanoi called Train Street, where the train actually goes through right in the middle of the city. And this video will show you what it's like. So as you can see, it goes straight down the middle of the street. And actually, when the train's not coming, there's coffee shops and stores all along this this railway that tourists will come just to see this train go through. Recently, in 2019, the government has put on some restrictions due to the amount of tourists that were flocking to this area. Clearly, there could be some safety issues that come with this, but tourists are still trying to see this very unique site.
Okay, so now we're in Ho Chi Minh City. It was a nice little ride. We're gonna start with what used to be Ho Chi Minh City, which was referred to by the French as Saigon. They were actually the governing force at the time who changed the name to Saigon. Ho Chi Minh City actually has had a long timeline regarding their name and what they're called, just due to the turnover of the leadership. But Saigon was the capital of South Vietnam up until 1975, when the Communist Party took control of South Vietnam. As I said, it's governed and run by the anti-communist leadership with assistance from both the U.S. and the French troops. Previous and most of these pictures that are shown here are from like the 1960s, and you can see the definite French influence. Like looking at the bottom right photo, there's not a whole lot of Asian architectural influence in that building alone. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that it was originally a French colony. And also, wait, you go back, Zach. Another thing to note is the difference in the population size and the use of transportation that's depicted in the images. The population is much smaller. There's not as high of a volume of people in the city at this time period. And also, cars were predominantly in use because there was the amount of space that was available to use it, because there was such a dispersed population of Vietnam instead of there being such a high volume. Also, if you look at the bottom left of the slide, there's an image of the women who they have like on the traditional dress. That also is not something you would see typically today, is like common wear. Right there. Okay. Now we go to Ho Chi Minh City in its modernity. You see high rises, a huge like infrastructure put in place. It has become the cosmopolitan capital. It's not the capital of Vietnam, but a lot of business is done in Ho Chi Minh City. It is the largest city in Vietnam, and it takes up roughly only 0.6% of the country's total land, which kind of gives you an understanding of how many people have to be in this area, in this tiny land area of like 0.6% of the country's total land. It's insane. Last time that there was a census done in Ho Chi Minh City, it was around 2007, but it has an estimated population of around 8 million. We don't have any like formal documents, but we do have an understanding that this is the estimate. You can't really see it in this photo alone, but now you have it where there's change in what forms of transportation people are using. So because there's such a high volume of people present in the city now, you have it where people do take the Reunification Express to get in there. But there's also a high use of Vespas and bikes because they're smaller and easier for transportation. There are people where it's almost like a taxi, where you can hop onto a little Vespa and take a ride downtown. A lot of people walk. There is busing as well. But again, there's such a high volume of people that the modes of transportation are typically those of public transport or walking. Even with how tiny the Vespas are, you can't fit a ton of Vespas and still be able to move. Ho Chi Minh City is also known for not only their business, but also their food market. A lot of tourism goes into seeing the varying street food and the markets themselves. The Ben Thanh market is one that typically tours are like geared towards. But there are some other markets around Vietnam that a lot of people go to. Some like the Dan Sing market, the Andong market. By the way, there's a lot of markets. Okay, Zach. This is just a visual representation of some of the food that's in the area. So in the top left, you have like a street vendor who's dishing out some food. The middle, it's called the top middle one. It's going to be known as slurp soup. It's a variety of vegetables and meats in a broth, and apparently it's like real good. Top right is going to be back to that market idea of all the varying goods that are available. They have a large variety of people and different ethnic groups that are in this very area, and that's kind of shown in their markets just with the varying people that are present. The bottom right photo is actually supposed to kind of give an understanding of how people dine out, where it's much more like family style, where everybody sits with everybody. They may not know everybody that they're sitting around, but the idea is there's not a lot of space, and if you want some good food, you're going to have to sit next to a stranger, and it's going to be a good time because you get a friend at the end of the night. But yeah, so Ho Chi Minh City is known for not only its history, its business, it's changed in its infrastructure, but it's also known for its food and culture that's developed there over the last century.
Another site that's outside of Ho Chi Minh City is the Chu Chi tunnels. They're a network of tunnels all throughout Ho Chi Minh City and the surrounding areas. They were created before the war, in the late 1940s, for their war for independence. But they were actually expanded during the Vietnamese War. The Vietnamese Viet Cong soldiers were a lot smaller than the American soldiers. So they were able to hide out in these tunnels without the less fear of the United States military being able to get in. As they hid in these tunnels, they also had booby traps and whatnot, so that even if the American soldiers got in, there would be a likely chance that they would get caught by one of these traps. There's tens of thousands of these tunnels. It's like a network all throughout the country. And that there are small parts to be able to view today by tourists. Likewise, in the war, they've been actually been widened to be able to have the Western tourists be able to fit in these tunnels for their viewing pleasure, which is a funny little side note. Nearby as well, in Ho Chi Minh City, is the Mekong Delta. It's a network of waterways that come to the Ho Chi Minh City and out into the waters. The river that is the Mekong Delta actually starts in the Himalayas and comes all the way down to Vietnam. So it's been a long travel since it started in the Himalayas. It's a vital source of food for Vietnam, as over half of the rice and fish of the country comes from the Delta. So really, without it, there would be a large economic impact. People who live in this area, water is really what revolves their life. There's tons of floating markets, and there's even like floating schools. Really, everything that your life is on is like boats and the water. A popular tourist activity is to ride on the boats that are on the bottom left picture, to be able to get an experience of like what it's like to travel these waterways. And while you're on these tours, they show you local food and culture, so you can kind of see what it's like to live on the Mekong Delta. The next slide will have a little video of what those riding those boats are like. So that's one of the very many waterways that's in the delta. As you can see, that this one's relatively quiet and not very busy. In other areas, there's a lot more hustle and bustle, where there's boats all around, where there's even like traffic jams where they have to find ways to get around to each other. It's definitely an experience that you have to check out when you visit Ho Chi Minh City. A site that's in actually like downtown Ho Chi Minh City, the central area, is the Ben Thanh Market. It's actually one of the oldest surviving buildings in Ho Chi Minh City. It's a symbol of the city and kind of the heart of the markets that Sydney was talking about. This is the biggest and most well-known one. You can find literally anything in this market, from war memorabilia to fabric and any tourist item you may need. This market's used by locals and tourists alike. Like many traditional markets in Asia and the surrounding areas, haggling is a part of the culture. When you try to buy something, don't be surprised if the price is a lot higher than you would want to pay for it. But this is part of the experience, is to try to get the price of your items down. They're inflated a lot of times 2 to 3%. Even if you've already bought your souvenirs before you've got to this area, go check it out, because it's definitely an experience just as much as it is a shopping opportunity. A special tip that I read is that if you want to get a good deal, definitely come in the morning. It's considered good luck to give your first customer of the day a fair price. So if you go to the market early, you'll likely be able to get some better prices, so that those sellers have luck the rest of the day. The Cao Dai Temple is northwest of the city, and it's very unique. It was built by the French in 1926, and that is around when the religion of Caodaism was created, where is what is performed at this temple. It's very unique, as it was created in southern Vietnam, and the vast majority of practitioners are still in South Vietnam. However, it's the third largest religion in the country. The other countries where this is found is Europe and America, where there are some Vietnamese migrant populations. It's not like any other religion. It's not like specific. It kind of is a blend of a lot of different ones. Some of the blend that people talk about is Christianity, Taoism, Confucianism, and Islam. Parts of all these different religions have come to create this one. As you can see, the temple kind of has a Christianity vibe to it, but when you go inside, you'll see you'll even on the outside, you see that there's like Buddhism and Islam. Like it's kind of like a groupings of all these different architectures. If you do view this temple, and you happen to come when there's a service time, there's multiple balconies that you'll be able to look into the temple in, so you can see how their services are, how they happen. What's interesting is that these services happen 4 times a day, 6 a.m., noon, 6 p.m., and midnight. And any follower of this has to come to all 4 of those services daily. So they're really devout about this, and they're like they live their normal lives on top of this, which is quite fascinating. The Reunification Palace was the home to General Neg Din Diem during the war until his assassination in 1963. This was kind of the last stronghold of Saigon toward the end of the war. April 30th, 1975, Northern Vietnamese tanks broke through the front gates of this building, which is really what marked the end of the war. Once they captured this building, the Northern Vietnamese, they renamed the city Saigon. No, it was named Saigon. They renamed it to Ho Chi Minh City, naming it after Ho Chi Minh, the great revolutionary leader that they respect. The reason that this site is a very popular tourist attraction is partially the historical significance, but also it's like a time capsule. If you go inside, it looks like just like it did in 1975. You can even, on the bottom right, as you can see, there's even the, two of the tanks that came into the compound are still there on display. There's also gardens, antique furniture, and a bunker. There are 5 stories that you can look through, and as you go through, it will feel like you're still in the time of the war. The artifacts are still there, and you can experience a time capsule feel.
As our voyage comes to a close, one of the things we wanted to highlight on was some points of post-war recovery in Vietnam. Post-war Vietnam faced 2 major roadblocks with their initial recovery from the war, and they are the form of the US placing economic sanctions on them and the Khmer Rouge coming to power in Cambodia. In 1986, Dao Moi, or renovation, was an economic policy enacted by the country which really opened up the economy and allowed it to flourish. As a result of this economic policy, Vietnam became one of the world's largest rice exporters, and then production in other sectors like manufacturing also exploded and really took off. In 1994, the US embargo on Vietnam was lifted, and the US and Vietnam began to normalize their diplomacy at that point. Since normalizing relations with Vietnam, the US has embarked on multiple endeavors to clean up the Agent Orange contaminated hotspots around the country. And the photo to the right shows the US Secretary of Defense, General Mattis, in Vietnam in one of the first earlier visits that the US took, like visits back to Vietnam as diplomats. And he's there meeting with a Vietnamese general at Da Nang Airport, which was a site where the US stored and prepped a lot of the Agent Orange chemicals.
The last couple slides will be the citations of our project, the various pictures and websites that we used to find some information.
But we wanted to thank you for joining us on our virtual voyage. It was rough that we weren't able to go this semester to Vietnam, but hopefully you got a taste of what we were all thrilled at the possibility of being able to see firsthand. I know I learned stuff from everything that was presented today. Hopefully you guys did too.
Absolutely. Thanks for taking this voyage with us.
Thank you, everyone.